You lied. Huh? I have no idea. But this is it.
Started in probably another 5 minutes. You know, the room was everybody signed up, and so we're still waiting for some people to arrive. So if you don't mind, we're just going to give them a couple more minutes to get here, and then we'll get started. I will. Maybe, yeah. We didn't have a year. Testing. Is there hello? All right, we're ready to go. Good afternoon. Welcome to the fall lecture of the 2022 Rosalie Reynolds EXPLORE History series. Welcome to those of you who are streaming on YouTube as well. I'm Linda Weisberg. I am a member of the Linda Foundation Board, and I'm also a member of the History Committee. As always, when we start out, we'd like to have a special thank you to our partner and presenting sponsor, Wells Fargo Private Bank. Our other longstanding partnerships include the North Carolina chapter of the Institute for Classical Architecture and Art, and of course the Duke Mansion. We deeply appreciate their ongoing support over these many, many years. So we have been wanting to bring this particular lecture to our series for a very long time. And we think we have found just the right people to tell this important story. So, well, it's really a tale of two historic parts of the city, Brooklyn and Hyde Park. Brandon Lunsford, the Johnson C. Smith, archivist, will share his work reconstructing Brooklyn, a vibrant Black neighborhood raised in the 60s in an urban renewal effort to place Charlotte's government center on that land. John Howard, Charlotte city planner, brings to us the story of Hyde Park, an elite Black community near Johnson C. Smith, which continues to thrive today. So I'm going to turn this over to our beloved Tom Hanchett, Charlotte's own master historian, to further introduce today's presenters. And by the way, did you know that Tom is the author of Sorting Out the New South City, Race, Class, and Urban Development in Charlotte, 1875 to 1975? And I'm smiling because, of course, you know this author. It is now in its second edition, and it's available at Parker Books. Be sure to check out Tom's seminal website. It's www.historysouth.org. I was on there the other day just to check a couple of facts, and 2 hours later, I was still reading. So, Tom, here you go.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. It's nice to see you all here. We were figuring a few more folks would show up because we had 150 people who said yes to coming. And then we figured out what it is. There's not only the President's Cup, but also the Panthers. You all sit down? The Panthers evidently are winning right now. So I think folks are home trying to see what that is, but we may have some other people coming in. There are many things I can talk about, but I'll try not to. I wanted to pass along some really cool books. Since we are talking a lot about African American history this day, I want to be sure that folks know that at your public library is Thriving in the Shadows, which is a photo book looking mostly at African American life in Charlotte, early 20th century. Fanny Flono from The Observer wrote the words. And then there's a brand new book called Legacy, 3 Centuries of Black History by Pamela Grundy. And this was kind of her COVID project. And we need a brief history of Black Charlotte. And there you go. So I'll just pass those around. Folks could take a picture of them if you want. And they have them at Park Road Books. And there's also something on the web called Amazon, evidently, where you can get all these things as well. So, anybody here have direct connections, either with the Brooklyn neighborhood or the Hyde Park neighborhood? Anybody? Can I bring the microphone over and just say for a minute about what your connection is with Brooklyn or Hyde Park? Would you be willing to let me do that?
Good afternoon. My name is Fred Glenn, and I live in Hyde Park. My wife and I, we built a house there about 24 years ago. And when I was a young boy growing up, and you wanted to see anything African American progress in 1962, when the lawyers, African American lawyers and doctors started building houses there. If you wanted to see progress, we would always ride out there. And I told my wife, I said, one day, I said, I'm gonna have a house out there. And we built it. But I told her when we were dating, we were sitting at the Chicken Drive-In on Beatties Ford Road in 1967. And I said, if you marry me, I'm gonna show you a place for me. But then it took 30 years before we've been married, 55 years. It took, 30 years before I was able to build a house out there at Hyde Park. So I kept my promises, and we're still together.
So really a neighborhood worth waiting for. Did I see your hand up? Brooklyn, Hyde Park? Folks, we have connections to Brooklyn, Hyde Park. Well, I'm sure glad we've got that one. We've got a couple of folks here who have connections to that. What we're going to do is first a visit with Brandon Lunsford, who I discovered through this book, Charlotte Then and Now. I'll pass that one around. He is currently the archivist at Johnson C. Smith University. Been there for 21 years. 21 years. He started as a child. He's also currently following in the footsteps of the previous archivist who became the director of libraries for Johnson C. Smith. She's moved on to another institution, and so you're looking also at the acting director of the library, and I can imagine that you've taken an hour out of your day having two jobs, but I really appreciate it. He has a master's in public history from UNC Charlotte, and that is history doing with people. So we're really glad that he's here. He grew up in Salisbury, North Carolina, but got here as quick as he could, that's what I was saying. And so he'll start us off talking about a project to document the old Brooklyn neighborhood, but also it's not the first time he's done something like that. He has an NEH grant to do, had an NEH grant to do a project that's completed and up on the web that he'll show off, archiving photographs of a great photographer here named James Peeler, and hitching them up to a map so that you can kind of walk around the map and listen to oral histories and all of that. So he's our first person, and then we'll have John Howard. And John Howard came all the way from the west here, got here as quick as he could, from Alton, Illinois, over to St. Louis, and he went to UNC Charlotte and got a master's there in geography. Did I say it right?
BA in architecture.
Okay, in architecture. And he has been interested, he was head of the Historic Districts Commission here in Charlotte for a number of years, and even before that was very interested in the Hyde Park neighborhood, and has a wonderful essay. He just signed a contract with a publisher to create a book about Black neighborhoods in Charlotte, and if we play our cards right, Brandon and I will each write a chapter in that. So make them both welcome. Give them a round of applause.
So I came here in '96 from Salisbury, and Tom was Tom's been my mentor this whole time I've been here. So he's always been a legend of Charlotte history. So it's really cool to have Tom introduce me. I feel like it should be the other way around, but that's pretty amazing. Thank you for coming to this. As he said, I have a master's in public history, and I kind of discovered archives kind of by accident. I got out of the library, wasn't really intending to do that for a career, but suddenly there I am, because it is public history. But so I decided I should go back to library school and figure out what I'm actually doing to work in the library. And I was like, you know what, if I want to be an archivist, I need to learn the bones of the theories, methodology, all that stuff, cataloging, metadata, all the detail-oriented stuff that I didn't really know. So I started going back to get my MLIS and started taking those archives classes, and I hated it. I still hate it. I hate that part of it. I don't like that part of it. I don't like the detail-oriented cataloging. So I was really worried that I'd done the wrong thing. But at the same time, I started taking a bunch of what I like to call digital humanities classes there. And there's a lot of these in library school right now. I got to take a GIS librarianship class and how to build a website, data visualization. All these classes, I started taking and loving these classes. And this is kind of what led me to what I'm doing now. And so I did make the right decision. It's not the way I thought I did. So the current project we're doing is about showcasing the urban renewal neighborhoods, not just Brooklyn, but also Greenville, 3rd Ward, 1st Ward, the African-American sections of those wards that were also torn down in the 1970s. The project he was talking about before was I built this site called westinCharlotte.org, and it's about the West End neighborhoods that are in near JCSU. And there's tons of amazing history in those neighborhoods that people know nothing about. I mean, there's still a lot of elders in that neighborhood who have lived there a very long time. We've been interviewing them for years. Monica Rue, my predecessor, and I have really been embedded in those communities, JCSU Library has been doing a bunch of outreach. Just kind of, because a lot of people would call us thinking that we would have these African-American archives, pictures and stories about the neighborhoods, and we just don't even have that stuff. We had stuff about the university history, and that's about it. So since I'm in the archivists, like you said, I am the director right now, I'm the archivist, I'm teaching classes, I'm cleaning the restrooms, anything you want, I'm doing all of it right now. But there's a lot of it used to be at JCSU that the students there would go to Billable Elementary first, they would go to West Charlotte, they would end up at JCSU, so the people that went there knew a lot about the history of the neighborhoods. That's not really the case anymore, because the students that are there now, they're usually not even from Charlotte, or the South even, a lot of them from the North or out West. So there's a whole lot in the neighborhood they don't know about. And the neighborhood's changing. Of course, I think anyone who drives over there now can tell the neighborhoods are shifting very hard. I mean, right now in Middleville, which is right across the street from JCSU, I mean, you just can't find any old homes there anymore. Everything's a new build. Everything's 500,000 or more. I think the first $1 million home, I think, sold over there recently. So it's just a way of life, and a lot of people of a certain generation are dying. And that period of history is dying, and new people are coming in that neighborhood. So I want to make sure that I document that stuff before it happens. So I built this website that I hope you can explore at length later on when you have a chance. But I'll just show it to you real briefly. We have to kind of dip out of this to show you that, and I'll jump back into it. So forgive me for that. This is the site, and if you scroll down a bit, you'll see kind of some oral histories that we did about 50 oral histories of people in the neighborhood that lived there a long time. And down here at the bottom, just have some themes of things that went on and that are all connected. But the main part of the site is here. It's due to something that's called history printing. And this is what I've gotten really into doing. It's like digital storytelling. I mean, digital humanities, I guess you would call it. Just to give you a brief example, because there's about 75 or 80 locations on this map, that I found using several different images from JCSU, from other places, UNCC, the Carolina Room, community members. So it's really just kind of a historic place kind of exhibit that kind of focuses on place to show, places, people, institutions that are here that no one knows about. Or people know about, but they don't know if they're still there. There's a lot of history in Charlotte that gets torn down. We all know that, but there's also a lot that's still there. I think Seltzer Club, for instance. And there's a very old picture of the Seltzer Club here. These are from the Peeler collection, which I'll show you in a minute. James Peeler had a photo studio on Beatties Ford Road. And one reason why we didn't know much about this neighborhood, or these neighborhoods, is because there wasn't that many pictures of them really. But the Peeler collection has really kind of opened that up. So this is an old picture of Nick Soldier that Mr. Peeler took. And if you move this thing to the side, you'll see a current shot of the thing. It's kind of a Google Maps tied in kind of place. One thing I didn't realize about this site when I did it was that when Google comes back and takes new pictures of the locations, it messes up what you did. Pretty cool. But also it's kind of, and watch it not work now. It doesn't. Just in the comments field, there's a lot of mapping sites, like mapping software, digital mapping things like story mapping, things like that. But I like History Pen because it let you layer the content in the comments. And of course, it's not working now because it needs to be refreshed a lot. But if you kept refreshing, you would see that there's some old histories in here at the bottom. There's some articles about the Excelsior, the articles of corporations from Excelsior, old pictures that Mr. Keeler found. So you can add lots of things in the comments field. It just kind of makes this more like a resource repository as well as image repository. So it's just a really cool thing for people to get interested in place and mapping and geography. So let me go back to my little presentation here. Takes a second for it to come back on. I've noticed because it scared me earlier. But the main part of this new project that we're doing is these maps. And actually, the amazing John Howard, who's sitting right over here beside me, is the main reason we have these maps, because he wanted to make sure that JCSU got these because he felt like we should have them. I don't know how well you can see, but we got 3 different grants to do this current project. One of them is from National Park Service. We got a grant from the National Archives, and we got a grant from the Knight Foundation to do this work. And this part of the maps was about national park funding. We got these. There's 46 oversized maps of the Brooklyn urban renewal. Well, not just Brooklyn, but all the urban renewal zones was 5 zones in Brooklyn, and there was Greenville, there was 3rd Ward, 1st Ward. So the first layer of all these maps will show you, like the one on the left there, will show you all the things that were there. I mean, homes, schools, businesses, churches, pool halls, YMCA's, YWCA's, all the amazing things that were in the Brooklyn neighborhood. And the other map will show you the land use plan, which is what happened after they tore all that stuff down. And in this case, that's where they built the expressway. So there's nothing over there. And a lot of these maps, so what we're going to do is have these, we couldn't scan these ourselves because our scanners were too small. So we got UNCC to scan them for us, and we're going to be building a digital exhibit site that kind of uses these maps to kind of bring you in the landscape. And you can shift back and forth between what was there, what is there now, sort of get an idea of just how that amazing part of town was destroyed. But to me, there's more to the story than just the physical things that were destroyed. There was the history and the culture that was destroyed. So now there's a lot of people that are doing this history that look like me. There's a lot of people that look like Tom and Pam Grundy. There's a lot of white people telling the history of these neighborhoods, not just in Charlotte, but everywhere. And I think that's a problem. It's, even though we are very invested in it, we didn't live this history. It's not us. We can never, ever understand in that way. So I think it's extremely important that I step back from this stuff and let people who live the history tell the story. That's why I'm very big into oral histories. And we've been collecting a lot of new oral histories, 10 to 15 new ones, along with the 50 we did in the West End. Because a lot of those are going to be touching on the same things, because when those neighborhoods were torn down, those people often moved to the West End, and they moved, the businesses came to the West End, and the churches came to the West End. So it's kind of a legacy neighborhood. The stuff that's under threat, under gentrification right now, is kind of the same people that have been under threat before with urban renewal. So, I mean, I think it's important not for me not to tell the story. I'm not telling the story. I don't want to tell the story. The story is there to be told by people that lived it. So this new site will have kind of a narrative that we hope like community members will be voicing, and then what leads you into oral history is that people will be remembering things, remembering places, remembering people. These are here at Sadler's, Papa Marie Sadler. They're in the Greenville neighborhood. They're absolutely incredible. And I mean, everyone we've met has been super gracious to us and just wanted to talk. And I mean, they look at me strange when they first see me too. They think, what's this white guy doing telling this history? But when they see how serious I am about it and I want to give the floor over to them, I think they're excited that someone wants to hear their stories. And the Saddles were particularly amazing. So this YouTube link, if you ever get a chance, if these slides go out, this is kind of Papa Marie drawing us around the Charlotte Music Factory, that stuff where the Greenville neighborhood was, and tell us about the asbestos factory where he used to work, things like that. So there's tons of oral histories that we are doing that will be designed to go on the site. There's also a ton that have already been done. I don't know if you know, but UNCC did an amazing oral history project on Brooklyn. Back when I was in grad school at UNCC, I wasn't part of this, but it was around 2009, 2010, I think. And they came and interviewed a whole bunch of people. Those are all on their website. So we're also got permission to use those. There's oral histories out there at UNC, Chapel Hill, at Duke, at the Carolina Room. So there is the story of these neighborhoods. It's out there. And one thing I'm really trying to do with this new project is find people that haven't talked before. Because a lot of people you'll see are always been interviewed. I mean, Dorothy Counts, we interviewed her. She's been interviewed a lot of times. Mel Ely is amazing. We interviewed her. She's been interviewed. We're trying to find people that have never talked to, see if they can kind of talk about something that's never been said before.
Question,
Yes.
is there any connection between you and BrooklynCollective.org?
Oh yeah, those guys are great. That's a great question too. I mean, this whole project kind of led me to them because we got some. When we first started doing this project, by the way, I got to point out that it wasn't just me that did this project. Well, I had a co-pilot, as I like to call her. Her name was Dr. Tekla Johnson, and she was working in the library with me, and she saw all those maps in the archives. I said, "What are we doing with those?" And I said, "Man, I don't really know yet." I told her about my mapping project, and she had been working on a mapping project of her town in Omaha, Nebraska, that had been torn down by urban renewal. And so we kind of got together, and at the beginning of the project, there was a lot of news coverage about it. And some guy at the Brooklyn Collective reached out to me and told me that he saw that. And I didn't know, there's only a few buildings left in Brooklyn they're there. And two of those, well, actually, three of those buildings are all together on Brevard Street. And it's the Grace Amy Zion Church and the Mecklenburg Investment Company building. Between them, there's actually a little building that was also there. And the Brooklyn Collective guys are doing amazing stuff in those buildings if you ever get a chance. They have a great art project right now over there, an art gallery, and there's music, jazz, it's always over there. And they've got an ongoing exhibit that has to do with the history. And if you walk in that church, you'll just see it amazing. You'll just feel amazing vibes. And it's like you feel like that's how it must have felt to be in Brooklyn when you're in that church. That's cool because it's also still kind of a business incubator for African American creators in the Mecklenburg Investment Company building. So, but anyway, yeah, we're tying with those guys. I'd love to have my exhibit kickoff thing there if that can happen. But so what we're trying to do is recreate the space of these neighborhoods that have been torn down through extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, which is all a whole bunch of, immersive realities. And all that stuff's kind of weird and complicated. I'm not sure what a lot of it means. We're not doing a lot of that part of it, not me and Dr. Johnson. But what we need to do this, I'll show you a little bit more of how that looks in a minute, but what we need to do first is figure out how the built environment looks. So we've been trying to collect as many pictures as we can. There's a lot of pictures of Brooklyn out there, but they're in different places. So one thing, this is what I'm trying to do with the West End map site as well. It's kind of make it a repository to bring all the stuff that's online, or not online. If it's not online, I'm trying to get it scanned. But people can see all the stuff that UNCC has. It's sitting in their archive that isn't out there. And the Carolina Room has, but people don't know it. So when people call me and they ask me, do we have something? I will say, I don't in the archives, but I can point to a site where you can see that image, or you can see, that street. So that's the idea. And of course, this is an iconic image. Second Ward High School is it's a legendary place to the folks that I talk to in the Brooklyn neighborhood, because it kind of made them the people they are today, and they still are absolutely devoted to. I don't even talk to anyone that I went to high school with, not one single person. These guys still hang out every day with people they went to high school with in the 1950s, 40s. So it's absolutely incredible. And those are the kids that would have gone to Second Ward High School right there in front of it if it had not been torn down. So we're trying to collect images, and I've been actively doing that, not just from archives, but also from community members. People have a lot of images themselves that they didn't realize that people cared about. Alumni Association, the Second Ward Alumni Association, those guys are incredible. Various churches around there have archives. Some of them are very, very great at sharing with us. Let's see. So some of our partners in this have been, I mentioned the UNCC Center for Film, which is also tied into Second Ward Alumni Association. They got some great images. I'm sure you guys have seen that book. It's kind of a small book about the size of that one they were showing earlier. It's Black Charlotte. I think there's a lot of great images that were collected there. A lot of this work has been done by researchers, African American researchers, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. There was a great guy, Reverend Mr. Granville Burke, who was a JCSU grad who actually wrote something called the Brooklyn Story. He took a lot of pictures and did oral histories back then. So we're just really building on work that has been done by community members this whole time. Again, it's part of why I feel like I'm just kind of giving people a platform to tell the stuff that's already been told, show stuff that people have already taken. I'm just a conduit. This site's going to be a conduit for people to see history. I was telling you earlier about the Peeler collection. This is something worth diving out to see because, like I said, Mr. Peeler gave us his daughter who works at JCSU. She made sure that we had his collection of photos. He had a photo studio that had 2 or 3 homes on Beatties Ford Road. And for a while, this is a huge collection, about 100,000 or maybe 200,000 items. It came with these giant rubber tubs, and we got a grant from the state library, and we hired a photograph archives, and she came in and just really whirlwind organized this stuff for us and scanned it and wrote this amazing metadata, described what was on the pictures, and so she just had an amazing momentum. And then she left and took another job. And she was grant funded, and we had a hard time when the grant was over to replace her. So that unfortunately kind of stopped in its tracks, and that's one thing we're trying to do right now. in the library, we've been having so many problems staffing. I mean, everyone's had this problem, so we have lost so many people that we've had to kind of stop some of our amazing history work and grant work. And so I finally got a full staff of people as of last week, and it's incredible. So one thing I want to do is get back to the Cooter collection, because I mean, there's about 50,000 of these that she's gone through, and there's at least 5,000 or 6,000 of them that are online. I want to show you real quick the Peeler collection. It's a smug mug. Smug mug is sort of like a Flickr kind of site. So if you just, it's Peeler's Portrait Studio. If you just Google Peeler's Portrait Studio, you'll find the pictures. But and it's all the pictures that we have. And for Peeler, of course, never thought that anyone would care about these photos usually. So he did not write often the year or what was in the photo or where the photo was taken. But if you ever did do that, we wrote it down, and you can see it in the images. There's several images of the Chickenette Drive-In in here, by the way, Brad. It's amazing. When you said that, I thought, oh, we got pictures of that. So that's a great picture. It's just kind of we wrote the grant kind of making, and he was sort of a civil rights photographer. We made it sound a lot more like that, so that we got the grant money, but because I mean, he did take a picture of Martin Luther King when he was here. He spoke at JCSU. And that's my alarm saying I'm going too long. So ignore it. Keep talking a little bit. But he did take pictures of Fred Alexander, Kill Alexander, and local civil rights leaders. But he also just took pictures of people just living their lives. I mean, going to birthday parties, weddings, funerals. I mean, it's just, he captures Black life in Charlotte, and especially in the West End. So it's just a really incredible collection, and it just lets you know that like they were living life like everyone else, and they were doctors, lawyers, you know, birthday parties. There were accidents that he took pictures of. There were movie theaters. There were just it was just like anything else, and it just wasn't documented, unfortunately, as well. So that's that. I'm gonna go back real quick and show you sort of our current project, just so you'll get an idea of where we're going. Couple seconds, fingers crossed, it's gonna come back on. Awesome. So we did some community surveys to figure out, this is the Knight Foundation part of our grant, to figure out, you know, did people want to really see like a augmented reality website? Could they use it? Would they use a website? Did they care? So we did a whole bunch of huge survey initiative where we sent a bunch of surveys out to community groups and to student groups, so different age groups. And we had some focus groups, the library, Beatties Ford Road Public Library, and just kind of talk about our project and try to get feedback from people. And so it's really interesting stuff when we analyze all the data we got. And I mean, you see the community survey here. Most of the people were 65 to 74 years old. That's the vast majority of the community members we surveyed. And like, when you see what was your format for learning and conducting research, look how much of that is internet research. I mean, these guys are on the web. I think there's this weird thing that people think that elders don't know how to use technology, and I don't think that's true. I think a lot of them have phones, they have email addresses, they may have Hotmail addresses, but they got email addresses, and they know how to use technology. And they're really, when we try to explain to them what we were doing, did you want this? I mean, the idea is to help them seem like they were walking down the street in the neighborhood. They never thought they'd be able to do that, and to see the stores they went to, the churches they went to, the schools they went to. So they were very excited about it. Student survey. I mean, these guys were about, and most of them were college students, there were some high school students, but they, of course, also got most of their info from the internet. But they also, you can see here, they also went to museums and libraries and exhibits and historical websites and libraries. So it's just a lot of that stuff we assume about the generations. I think there's a generational shift going on right now. And I really see this kind of technology, digital humanity stuff we're doing as kind of a way to reach, you know, these two can learn something from each other, I think. That we hope with this augmented reality, immersive stuff, it's kind of going to look like games, like gaming environments, which is what all these kids know. They see this stuff. And, I mean, at Smith, we're unfortunately moving away from the humanities, and the history major right now is teaching out. Which means the last two history majors we have right now are like going to be the last ones at JCSU. It's not going to be an English major anymore. It's not going to be a Spanish major or a French major. There's no all stuff going away. And there's going to be something else that's called global humanities, or something else called cultural studies, but it will have a home. But JCSU is shifting towards STEM technology, and that's where the money is, right? That's where they think that these kids need to be getting jobs. So I'm trying to pull people in with this technology that we're doing and say, hey, look, there's incredible technology here. It's grant-funded technology. So that's the way to get the foot in the door. They'll see the games, hopefully, and they'll say, oh, this is something that I'm familiar with. And they'll learn something, something they would never have learned otherwise because they didn't think they cared. Community survey here, we know this was the case, but we didn't know how stark was the case. But the communities, I mean, most of them, 24% of them would say that they were the most experienced. So they know the most you could possibly know about history of Charlotte. The students, 19.4% or zero. They know zero about African-American neighborhoods in Charlotte, which is kind of sad. So we're moving on past this, and I want to show you our vision for what we're doing. Sort of, if you can imagine, like panning down to a cityscape and kind of moving around. That's sort of what this site's going to look like. If you have a chance offline to go to this New York Times interactive Tulsa Race Massacre site, it's really cool. It's sort of what we're doing. So I don't have time to show you that right now. When you have a chance, just Google Tulsa interactive map, and it'll show you kind of what I'm talking about. You go down these buildings and move around. It's going to be called Virtual Black Charlotte when it's done, and it's going to be a repository, sort of like what we were talking about before. It's also going to have a narrative mapping part. It's an interactive stuff that's going to be 3D. So, for instance, the Civil Way, which was in Brooklyn, and when you go down on this is a screenshot from what we're going to do. You'll be going down this street, and you'll see the Civil Way, which is more. We know more about it in the other building, so it'll be kind of out. It'll look like this. It'll look like the picture, and hopefully you'll be able to go inside maybe. There's another good picture of Sycamore High School right there on the right, and the Greer Funeral Home. So here's what that's going to look like. So it's like recreating the streets in an augmented reality, like interactive kind of environment. And we hope that this is something, you'll be able to see all the pictures of it. So we're hoping this is something that's going to grab people, and that, that maybe elders that may not have known this was possible will learn something about technology, and will learn something, and then these younger folks will learn something about history. So the hope is that we're all going to learn something we didn't know before. And now I'm going to hand it over to Mr. John Howard for his part. Thank you for listening.
While they're shifting over, I'm just tickled about being able to see the Greer Funeral Home and Second Ward High School in relation to each other. I didn't know they were next to each other. Right. I've been living with this for a long time. Can you hear me through this? I think I've turned myself off. Question there, real quick.
Could you just say the website again?
Say the website again, if you would, Brandon.
Well, this one's not ready yet. I mean, it will be Virtual Black Charlotte.
Virtual Black Charlotte.
But the one you can go to is westinCharlotte.org. You can see that.
Westin Charlotte. For folks who don't know where Brooklyn was, it's where the government center is. It's where the NASCAR Hall of Fame, the Aquatic Center, that whole area. Wiped out when the federal government had the urban renewal program in the 1960s. But at that point, some of the elite had already moved out Beatties Ford Road, a number of different neighborhoods out there, but the one that really came into being in the 70s is the one that John's fired up about, that Harvey Gantt was involved with, C.W. Williams and the C.W. Williams Clinic, and maybe Elaine.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Brandon, for that great introduction to this topic. I do want to recognize some Hyde Park residents here, Mr. Fred Glenn, good friend of mine from back in the day. We working on a project right now in Cramerton, Gaston County. Anybody else here from Hyde Park or the Beatties Ford Road community? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Neese. I live in Lincoln Heights, and my grandfather lived in Brooklyn during that period of time. And my grandparents moved from Brooklyn to the Beatties Ford Road area.
Right.
In
Thank
the
you.
60s.
Thank you. Welcome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Hyde Park Estates. But first of all, I got brought into this project back in 2014. The then neighborhood president, Maceo Bowman, and he said, you know what, I'm going to document our history. We're going to talk about this neighborhood, the people who live here, not just about the houses, but also about the society itself. So all these folks here I interviewed through oral histories and just kind of get their take on the neighborhood and how they grew up. And it was a great experience. Went to all the cookouts, neighborhood meetings, and just had a really, really good time meeting everyone. And this is kind of a basic timeline of what's been happening since Brandon dropped off his presentation about Second War Brooklyn. Late 1800s, you see the African American progress from then. Second War Brooklyn, Cherry, Littleville. Then we have Drury Heights, West Boulevard, Lincoln Heights, Victoria Heights in the 1950s and 60s, Oakland Park, University Park, Delbrook. Then moving out towards the suburbs, out past 85, then you start to cross over to the next version of the suburban experience with Victoria Heights. And most recently, Victoria Heights, Oakland Park have become the most recent historic districts in Charlotte. The first two local historic districts, African American neighborhoods, that have just been nominated this year. So that happened in 2022.
Does that mean that they can't tear down buildings, or what does that, is that protecting it all?
Definition of local historic district. So the purpose is you want to preserve kind of what's there, right? And they can put a 1-year stay of demolition on any historic properties. So if the home is extant, meaning if it's original home, they can put a 1-year stay of demolition on that property. And they regulate things like windows, if you want to add on to the property, you want to take down trees, there's a long list of stuff that you can and cannot do. But you can still demolish a property. If you're like in Charleston, that's way different. And so we're much more relaxed in that way in Charlotte. So that's what that is. And it's also a National Historic District designation, which is what Forest Park is, and also Wesley Heights, where you get a tax credit. If you want to do kind of remodeling or improve your property, you can get a tax credit for that property. So there's two different things. So there's historic landmark status, and there's historic district status, and there's National Register status. There's kind of three different levels of preservation. Just on some geography, Historic West End, that was branded back in the early 2000s, kind of promote historic preservation in the community north of Center City. So the loop that you see on the bottom right, that's Center City, Charlotte. Then you go from J.C. Smith that Brandon talked about, number one, that's where the university is. They're walking up north, Washington Heights in 1910. That was the black streetcar suburb in Charlotte back then. Victoria Heights in the 50s, Oakland Park, Oakland Avenue, Lincoln Heights, and University Park in Delbrook. And then moving past 85, you have Brookwood Estates, Hyde Park Estates, and then Trinity Park and Hummer Park. Now you're starting to see this progress of black neighborhoods progressing from Riddleville and Second War Brooklyn up towards the suburbs north of 85 on Beatties Ford Road. The bottom left picture, that's the home of Beatties Chambers. If you know anything about law in Charlotte, that was his birthplace, his home in Northwood Estates, just north of I-85 off Beatties Ford Road.
That was his birthplace?
His home, not birthplace, his home. We've been trying to get that as a landmark, but we've been kind of struggling with getting the new homeowners to actually agree to that. So we haven't quite gotten that far yet. Victoria Heights, again, this was developed in the 1950s by Reverend H.M. McCrory, former president of JCSU. So now you're starting to see that progress of going from lots of smaller lots and more urban areas, larger lots. Now people have cars, starting to experience more wealth. They have garages now, carports, built in the 1950s. And this is where the Charlotte educators live, and the ministers and other folks who lived in this part of the city, just north of J.C. Smith. The bottom right picture, J. Delane, he was a very prominent civil rights activist, very involved in the civil rights movement in terms of education in the city. So this neighborhood is really, really known for its place in civil rights activity in Charlotte in the 1950s.
Is the Hawkins house the one that was bombed?
Reginald Hawkins' house is the top right.
But is that the one that was bombed?
It was. So there were 4 homes that were bombed in the 1960s because of the desegregation efforts that were taking place. It was Freddie Alexander, his brother Kelly, 2 of his Chambers, and Rachel Hawkins. Yes, sir.
Those are all still there.
And they're all still there. Yeah. Back in 1965, I believe. So fast forward, Hyde Park is a very interesting and cool neighborhood. It was laid out in 1962. So at the tail end of the civil rights movement. And if you want to look at Hyde Park and Macquarie Heights, they're kind of like cousins in a way. You see Macquarie Heights is being kind of that first level of being the new suburban neighborhood. Hyde Park is the next step. It was, again, developed by 2 doctors. They were developers. They were 2 physicians, Dr. C.W. Williams and Dr. Walter Washington. And there were no restrictions based on race. Like back in the 50s and 40s, we had deep restrictions based on your race or your income. But these neighborhoods did not have that kind of restriction on their properties. What they did have was restrictions based on, maybe you can't have a house or a lot less than half an acre. But they weren't based on any kind of racial covenant. The original name of this neighborhood was called the Moors. But when they took a trip to Los Angeles, they said, you know what, I think we like Hyde Park better. So they saw some names out there. They said, you know what, let's name the neighborhood called Hyde Park Estates. So the name like Sierra Drive and La Brea, Crestwood, those all came from the neighborhood they saw out in Los Angeles. And so the first properties were 52 parcels, right off, again, Beatties Ford Road, just north of Sunset Road. And the goal was to build like this new suburban, very intimate neighborhood for Black folks. So the first location was actually off of Statesville off Sunset, but they could not get that property secured. So they found another property, again, that was owned by a white man, and he didn't want to sell it to him at first. So it wasn't until he passed away when the kids said, let's sell it to him and let them build this neighborhood. So that's how that neighborhood came about. There were some threats out there. This is like, again, Charlotte, 1960s. There were some veiled threats, but nothing really major happened. But, so he went ahead and kept the development progress started. C.W. Williams, he was born in Kentucky, he went to Meharry and Fisk. He opened his first medical office in Brooklyn Second Ward in the 1950s. He was a staff member at Good Samaritan Hospital. Who knows where that was? Yeah, where Kansas Stadium is. But that's where the Good Samaritan Hospital, that African American hospital was. He was given a partial membership to the NC Medical Society in 1961, and the first African American member of that. Some were not happy about that. They thought that he should have gotten full membership. But he said, you know what? I'll take partial membership for now because that's a foot in the door. And now that way, more can come after me. So he was very visionary about that as well. And he lived in Oaklawn Park. So he raised his family there and then sought to develop Hyde Park Estates. Building on the top right is still there. That's Walton Plaza. He helped develop that property. And in that building were Julius Chambers, James Ferguson, Robert Belton, Mel Watt. So all of the Black elite really were part of that development back in 1972. After Renewal came in and tore it down, and they came back in and built this building back in 1972. They also built this building across from Northwest School of the Arts. 1404 Beatties Ford Road was a medical office building that he built for his constituents. And of course, he built this on Wilson Boulevard, the C.W. Williams Healthcare Center. It was called the Metropolitan Comprehensive Healthcare Center back in '81. Renamed the C.W. Williams Community Center. It's still there, and they're actually expanding. They have dental service now. They have another facility, I think, in Gilbert as well. So they're expanding and carrying on his legacy. And I took a few quotes from some of my interviews with the neighbors. What I thought really was telling about what the whole attitude about the neighborhood was. First one, the Hyde Park community has historically been socially and culturally active. Residents of concerts, vocal, instrumental recitals. That's from Bavaric Sellers, who's a longtime resident there. Second quote is from the daughter of CW. My mother was the woman behind the king, and she helped guide some of the decisions. My father was brilliant. He was visionary. Hyde Park Estates was a wonderful vision brought to fruition by my mother and father, my father and mother. So that was from the daughter. And the last quote, you can have a bigger and better homes, but it's a relationship that makes a difference and involvement in your neighbors being involved in other people's lives. And that's from Wyatt Chase. So just a few quotes I got from the oral histories from the neighbors there. And Mrs. Williams actually created the covenants for the neighborhood.
She just died.
Yes, yes, sir. And they pretty much just had coverage about the physical landscape, if you will. So it's their materials, minimum house size, as I said before, garages and buildings, site design and land use. So back in '62, they created these covenants. Again, it did not include anything about race or anything about economic value of the homes, but all about just the quality of the landscape you experience. So then it came back time to start selling. So they brought in Pastor Daniel Hennigan. Some of y'all may have heard that name before. He was an agent to sell the homes in Hyde Park, and he was the first African-American member of the Charlotte Board of Realtors. And this is from an ad in the Observer back in 1969. Just on the left-hand side, description of the property, suburban living in beautiful Hyde Park, more than half an acre of lots. Beckenhurst only Negro subdivision for custom building. So that's how they kind of advertised homes on back then. About 3 miles from Center City. So yeah, that was Pastor Hennigan. He passed away several years ago. He was the first black realtor.
He was also the first candidate for county commission ever, first black candidate, and he's a Republican. I was just campaigning it.
Oh. There you go. Connections, yeah. Always connections. Always connections. And to get back to the tie between Corey Heights and Hyde Park, when Brookshire Freeway was getting built, they had to remove some homes and buildings from that area. So they tore down a school, buildings from a school, but they moved 4 homes from the neighborhood and put them in Hyde Park Estates. So these were the 4 that people agreed to have transported from McCrory Heights to Hyde Park. And I found this out about with the deeds. I said, you know what, these homes were built before the neighborhood was platted. So there's some digging in, research, and I found out that's moved out here because of the deed research. So 62, 55, 58, and 60. The neighborhood was not platted until 1962. They get developed in 1967. That's how we kind of made that connection. So this was the home of C.W. Williams, built in 1963. 1-story ranch house, very well done, still there. The great thing about this neighborhood is it's pretty much all still intact. Not many homes have been torn down. It's all pretty much all original. It's a really, really cool landscape, very suburban, lots of mature trees. It was restored by Charles Senko. He couldn't be here today, which he would have. He talked about how he went through that process, but they bought the house, restored it, and it looks fabulous. This home on Meridian actually was designed by Harvey Gantt, our first African-American mayor in the 20th century. Clemson University, with Iowa State first, actually, and then with Clemson. So I was talking to him, and I was going to Iowa State too, but we both agreed it's too cold. So we said, yeah, let's come down here. So he went from Iowa State down to Clemson, graduated from there with architecture, had his own firm here. This is his first design in Charlotte. It's for Willie Bullock, who's also a photographer. Had his photography studio on the corner of Booker Avenue and Beatties Ford Road. The house is still there, actually. And all the stuff's still in there, built-in phonograph, intercom systems, all that stuff is still there. So he restored this house, then sold it to one of the family members of Bully Boy. His second design was in the same neighborhood, next door to the C.W. Williams house. This is the Tommy Nash house, who was his dentist. So he designed this home for him. And these pictures were actually in the home. They're kind of on the wall, so I got a shot of those. But again, very contemporary ranch style home. But the thing I like about the homes are double doors. You see the details, they're very, very cool. The brickwork, again, very Western, West Coast style that he brought back to the city, to the East Coast. This is the home of Dr. and Mrs. Spurgeon Weber from 1970. They were probably the first group that invested with Dr. Williams to build this neighborhood. And they were intentional nonconformists. All right, so they were like, no, we're going to do something completely different in this community. So the house is still there. It's definitely still intact. The picture on the bottom right came from an Observer article back in 1972. And it's very, again, Spanish style colonnade on the front. This is a really, really unique home. One of my personal favorite homes, this is butterfly style contemporary house that was built in '66, the Graham House on La Brea Drive. The original owners were Reverend H.L. Graham and Clara Graham. Reverend Graham was a minister at Mount Olive Church here in Charlotte for 24 years. The wife is still there. She's one of the teacher at First Ward. So you see there's a lot of, again, a connection between Croydon Heights and Hyde Park. Teachers, ministers, educators. I mean, it was all much a tight-knit community between those two. Talk to the family of this home. This is Mrs. Saunders. They were both educators as well. This house is kind of like a cat slide. You can see the long sloping roof off to the left-hand side. They actually went around Charlotte looking at homes like South Charlotte, East Charlotte to find what they wanted to build. And this is what they wanted to build. They had a hard time finding a builder. All of the white builders didn't want to build for them. They felt like they were like, no, we don't want to build for you. So they found a African-American builder named Kim Williams who built this house for them. They just couldn't find a white company to build for them. But a great family. This is the home of Dr. Mary Harper. She was a co-founder of the African American Cultural Center that was first located down in First Ward. She was actually my English professor at UNCC, who passed away a couple years ago. But the new Afro-Am Center is uptown. They moved here back in the 1960s. They lived on Belmont Park as well. But she was, again, the co-founder of the Afro-Am Center, and just a magnificent professor and leader in the Charlotte community to get the Afro-Am Center built. One of the homes that was moved from Victoria Heights is Cornelia Ivory. Again, a long-time Charlotte advocate. She was on education for years with J.C. Smith. Also tied to the Charlotte community. Was born at the Long Beach of the Pine back in 2009. So again, just all these different relationship ties to the city. The other house that was moved here was Spencer and Rosalie Durant. Spencer Durant was a principal at Second Ward High School and also at West Charlotte High School. And his wife, Rosalia, was also a teacher, taught in Nigeria, and they own this home in Hyde Park as well, and it's still there. And this is where I'm going to kind of end my talk. Mr. Glenn is here, so I'll let him have the mic if he wants. But Fred and Ernestine live in Hyde Park Estates, and they purchased, and Fred grew up in Pemberton, in this neighborhood called Baltimore Village. And he found out that they're going to burn the schoolhouse down fire training, and he purchased the property from the state a few years ago. So I'm on the board as well, so full disclosure. And we're trying to raise money to help restore it back to the community center museum, to get back to the neighborhood for that purpose. He and his wife have done a great job. It's on the study list for preservation. We just got a grant from Preservation of Carolina for what, $10,000, I believe, to help restore it, and applying for another grant, a state grant. So just a great social history between Hyde Park and McCory Heights, a whole Charlotte history, and now it's becoming regional now, not just Mecklenburg County, but also Gaston County. So I definitely raise you up, Fred, what you've done to help fit that school. So thank you for that. And then one thing I also did with this neighborhood is just do like what we call a windshield survey, going through all the properties, the original properties, showing the age, the address, the type of house it is, condition, materials, so that if they want to pursue any kind of storage district status, they could have this kind of in their toolbox, right? So they can actually have this and look, we do qualify for being National Register neighborhood or local district or whatever. So that is the end of my discussion. Here's all the resources I went through, also with the oral histories. Yeah, so that's my presentation. So thank you all.
The battery went out on the other microphone. Isn't that cool? I love the way these fit together, because what Brandon is doing is building this archive of all of these resources. And what John has done with a different set of resources is build the stories that come out of that foundation. And so you're kind of getting to look at what historians do and historian helpers do. And I'm so grateful that these folks are here in Charlotte. Questions, comments, memories to share? Yes.
I have a question. Let me come here. A question about the school in Bremerton. How is that the same or different from the Rosenwald school?
Pass this down to Mr. Blank.
Okay, the Rosenwald School was built by, Rosenwald built about 2,500 schools, African American schools in the South back in the 20s. But this school was built by Stuart Kramer. He was a industrial pioneer, and it was from the Kramer Mills back in the day. And he built that school for the African American workers, kids. And it was 8th grade taught in one room. And it's the only one room school left in the whole county, Gaston County. So that's the difference in Rosenwald and the Baltimore Village School.
You live about 2 blocks from here, this way.
Say again?
Mr. Kramer lived near here. That's Richard Denrick, mayor, among other things. If I give you the microphone, would you say a few words about what you do?
I just made observations. Dan Hennigan was an African-American realtor. I had just gotten out of the war in Vietnam. I met him at a little Republican gathering. There weren't many Republicans in Charlotte then. There aren't many now either. He got interested in running for county commission, and he was the first African-American candidate for county commission in the history of Mecklenburg County. He came within 600 votes of winning. And the Democratic Party got nervous about that, and they began nominating African Americans shortly thereafter. Dan ran one more time and lost again, and then he said, "I've had enough." He was a wonderful man and a wonderful Presbyterian minister. He taught out he preached out at Merklin Matthews Presbyterian Church, way out Old Providence Road, and he lived over right near Johnson C. Smith. That's where he and I met many years ago. Just small world stuff.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Other questions, comments, things to share?
I read a book and I can't remember, they referenced you in it. It's about Brooklyn and it was about a lady who worked at a cafeteria. Do you remember the name of that book?
Ah, we're talking about the novel Tomorrow's Red, which has been very popular in this area and nationally, actually, for the last couple, 3 years. And a woman who wrote it, I'm really bad with names. Anna Jean Mayhew. Anna Jean Mayhew. It's at Park Road Books, and it is trying to be in that neighborhood. What was it like to be in Brooklyn in its heyday, which bumps up right against that urban renewal thing? And so there's a minister who loses his church, and there's just people stories. And so yeah, that is another way that your material will be used by creative folks who are not officially doing history, but are working to bring us into connection with that. Yes.
Are there, a lot of the historic districts do home tours. Are there anything like that going up in Hyde Park?
Is there going to be a Hyde Park home tour or something else?
It'd be interesting to get other people to go to the area to even just to visit the businesses or to get some outsiders, because it's not on the way to anywhere.
Yeah, so one thing that we were doing is the mid-century modern home tours, which kind of focus on more of South Charlotte area. We've been talking about doing that for Hyde Park, but just haven't quite gotten momentum about that from the neighbors. So we'll get their blessing first before we start doing that kind of thing. So, but we're talking about doing that, but haven't really done it officially yet. I know some on my own personally with Hyde Park, but not on a broad scale.
There's a Jane Addams, one year they had Jane Addams that went through Hyde Park and JCSU, a walking tour. In May, when they had the Jane Addams.
The James walks,
Jane Jacobs walk.
The Jane walks tours. That could be done.
Two of those people next to each other.
Yeah, right, and the tour was going on about the same time.
Yeah, that could be done.
Yeah, UNC Charlotte has a thing called City Walks, which before COVID was like volunteer-led walks. John did a whole bunch of them of neighborhoods, and that would be a great way to get in there. Yes.
I kind of have a question about the Hyde Park, where you mentioned one of the residents picked out her home design, couldn't find a builder, and then she found a builder. So who were the builders in Hyde Park? Was there not a dedicated builder there, or did people just pick a home design they liked, just as long as it followed the rules? And so some builders want to come in and some didn't. I mean, what was I'm sorry, that's kind of an odd question, but
That's a great question. That's the kind of question that we love.
May not be able to answer, I ask that all the time. We love odd questions. So, yeah, a lot of times, because there were custom built homes, they're all every home is different. No homes are alike at all. They're all individual. So they could find their own homes. They a pattern book back in the day. They had like different house designs. And the Saunders house that I mentioned, they had to go find a black home builder. That they did find, Ken Williams. I think he actually did do a lot of homes in the neighborhood. I haven't quite got that nailed down yet. But that was kind of the route that people took, is finding who could build or wanted to build a home for them.
I didn't know if it was something with like prejudice or certain builders.
It was.
Or the type of design was just not in their toolbox or.
Now, with the Saunders family, they said in very great detail that the white builders that they talked to did not want to build for them. They felt like this house is too good for you. And I'm just putting from what they told me, and we don't want to build this for you. So it was just prejudice. So they did finally find a black home builder to build, or who wanted to build for them.
I saw Richard Bitter's hand up again.
My dad was a builder, a small builder. He built several homes in Hyde Park. He also built a home for the president of Johnson C. Smith over at Oak Lawn Park, which I don't know if it's there now or not. And I don't think it's the current president's home, but it was a nice home on the corner of Oak Lawn Park. I was actually the Boy Scout master there for about 10 years at First Baptist Church West, which was a few blocks from the house my dad built. But my dad built several homes, both in Hyde Park and in Oak Lawn Park in those days. It was a small world.
Do you have a list of those?
Hopefully still standing. I don't know.
Okay. That's seriously, preservation people get really excited when somebody says something like that. I saw a hand over here, but it's.
I was just asking him, street names, I mean, literally,
Street names.
What's the boundaries of?
What's the boundaries of Brooklyn, would you say,
Well,
Brandon Lunsford?
Brooklyn's second floor.
Let's try Brooklyn first, because some folks don't know that.
I mean, Brooklyn, it's so weird walking around Brooklyn now, looking at these maps, because they just destroyed a lot of the streets. I mean, you can't, not just the homes, they destroyed the streetscapes, and you can't figure out where you would have walked, but yeah, the main streets being like what's now MLK Street and Brevard, Caldwell, McDowell Street, those are the streets in there.
Well, I was gonna say, when I went to the presentation that Brooklyn Collective did, I was blown away that it was 1,400 homes made up of Brooklyn and 250 businesses. So it is much bigger than Singapore.
Yeah. And of course, when they talk about the reason they were tearing these homes down in the paper, they would show the bad homes. There were some homes in terrible shape, of course. I mean, a lot of those were white landlords who didn't pay attention to the homes, but there was also some amazing homes, all different kinds of income levels that were there. So they didn't represent it very well in the media.
John Howard, where's Hyde Park?
So Hyde Park is just north of Sunset Road, up on Beatties Ford Road. If you go past the Food Lion Shopping Center, it's about maybe a half mile down the street, and off to the right hand side, there's the church on the left, University Park, up the Park Ministries, and on the right hand side is where you can find Hyde Park Estates. It's Hyde Park Drive, it goes around. It's one way in, one way out. You can't get out the back way, so it's a loop. And there's two parts. So there's the original part, it's the 52 homes original. Then there's a phase two in the back, that was built back in the 1970s. That's a newer piece of the neighborhood. But it's all kind of, yeah.
And the 70s thing is really important because according to the kind of rule of thumb for whether an area can be a historic district or not, it needs to be 50 years old and pretty much look like it did 50 years ago. Right? So John's been way ahead of this because we're just now getting to the point where much of Hyde Park in the 70s can be considered historic, but he's there already. Is he here?
I just have a question, a suggestion. First of all, I want to congratulate y'all on all the man hours y'all put in. I can just can't even imagine hours y'all put in just to research deeds and talk with people and all of that. So that deserves a round of applause. And y'all did so much groundwork. And y'all thought about like making a video documentary that could be posted on the website and maybe eventually on PBS. It's just my inner nerd talking right now.
Well, I will say that we can do a lot of stuff. These guys can do a lot of stuff with some more fundraising. So if any of this gets you excited, seriously, the school in Bremerton or the possibilities of getting a new archivist to finish the Peeler project or a video, all of those things help.
Yes. I think going back to Mr. Glenn's project in Bremerton is a great way to get involved. We're working on our book. Again, Tom mentioned earlier about our contract with History Press in Charleston, so that's going to be coming out hopefully next year sometime. But I think the video idea out with YouTube and all that stuff is fantastic. I think we're right on target. So yes.
Person in the back, yell out, I'll try to repeat.
I heard the woman say 1,400 residents in Brooklyn around there, and 52 houses up in Hyde Park Estates. Where did everybody go?
Where did everybody go? There was literally no plan. I've been working on a history of affordable housing in Charlotte, and it just breaks your heart because the Alexander family, Keller Alexander, head of the NAACP, and Fred Alexander, eventually became first city council person here. In the 50s, early 50s, when they first start talking about, we can get federal money to tear down Brooklyn, they go, hey, you can build some new housing. And the government says, we need new housing, we got plenty of housing. And eventually we got to the point in the mid-late 60s where HUD literally shut down every federal project here, or at least they threatened to, until Charlotte finally would build some houses. So there wasn't, you know, a planned replacement. Folks kind of filtered out into neighborhoods. If you were a doctor, you would filter up to McCoy Heights or to Hyde Park. But if you were a renter, it was pretty tough.
This is the one thing we're really trying to do is try to trace where people went when they were displaced, which is a Herculean task that can probably never be done. But one thing we've been doing is looking through all the city directories, which are like gold, of course. I don't tell you names of people where they went, but we are trying to trace the businesses that were destroyed. That to me is a huge part of this whole story. The African American homeowners and African American business owners were pushed out. So like you're missing like it's like wealth creation, generational wealth that was destroyed by doing this. And so we're trying to actually kind of prove all that stuff by saying, look, these are the black businesses that were here in this time. These are the ones that are here now. There aren't hardly any. These black homeowners that are here now. These are the ones that disappeared and weren't able to own a home in Charlotte anymore. So it's a huge task to try to track all those people down. I mean, some of them moved to the West End, of course, but some of the like Hidden Valley. I know I'm talking to someone in Hidden Valley, all over the place, Hyde Park, Trinity Park.
And streets like West Boulevard had black and white neighborhoods until urban renewal started to push African Americans to wherever they could go. And Mike Ward here has done a bunch of work on West Boulevard, looking at the black developers and the white developers and what happened, so that West Boulevard became almost entirely African American. So we can just keep doing this for a while. I see many hands. I'm going to do one or two more hands here.
You about Wood Hill neighborhood.
Hang on a second. Let me put my computer.
I wanted to ask about the Druid Hill neighborhood. I was built in the 40s.
Druid Hills is, y'all want to come work for us? We don't have any money. Druid Hills is so cool. Druid Hills is in Grand Statesville Avenue. And houses built in the 40s, houses built in the 50s. Michael Porter, some of you may know, great jazz flute player out of Charlotte. He grew up and was telling me about that neighborhood. And it's a neighborhood that started out as a white neighborhood very early on, had black homebuyers. And so Druid Hills, and today Druid Hills is one of many neighborhoods like Billville that's going through whole other set of changes. And so if there were more of us, we would start doing something on Druid Hills.
Ask the question, where did those people go?
Yeah. Okay.
Neighborhoods like that.
Cool. And indeed, some folks in Brooklyn went out to Druid Hills. Absolutely. Cool. Thank you. Too many interested people.
What's the percentage of white, black ownership when Hyde Park first opened? What is it roughly today?
Percentage of home ownership, demographics in Hyde Park, 100% African American when it first was developed. Now, probably 98%. You have new, during my meetings with the homeowners there, we're trying to keep the African American presence there as much as possible, but it's a free society, free market. So again, no restrictions on race like back in the 40s and 50s like we used to have. So really now it's more like maybe 98% African American, maybe 2% white.
That's my friend.
You repeat that last statement, please.
Yes.
About 98%. 90%. About 98.
What?
Yes.
Everybody wants to talk to everybody else. This is great. Give yourselves a round of applause. Give them a round of applause. And
Will they be announcing the date for the next lecture like they usually do?
Before you go,
I think that maybe.
before you go, we'd love to tell you what's coming up. So every year, at the end of the year, we always have a very special presentation for Veterans Day. And this year's no different. It's November 6th. And we have a very special book and author presentation for you. Meredith Ritchie, who is a Charlottean, has written a wonderful book called Poster Girls. And it is about the World War II munitions plant here that was the largest employer in Charlotte, probably the most dangerous place to work in Charlotte, and it was staffed by 90% women, a diverse group of women, white and black women working together, riding the buses together. And she is here today. Here she is right here. And she will be here on November 6th to talk about the women who helped us win World War II. So thank you for coming. Enjoy the wonderful fall weather ahead, and we hope to see you in November.
And the Panthers won.
On the